episode 3 of the RAS200 premiere videos. We've got a really exciting session today because we are joined by a team of people from the Bounce Back Foundation. So let's start by introducing the two people that we've got today. Can you please introduce yourselves and your role at the Bounce Back Foundation?
Hi Sheila, I'm Fran, the CEO of Bounce Back.
I'm Mari, and I'm the project manager on Explore, the RAS200 project.
Welcome, both of you. It's nice that we can meet like this, even though obviously we're not in the same places at all. So we're all learning new skills during this time, for sure. Okay, so if you could give us an overview of what Bounce Back sort of usually does when it's not doing RAS200 projects and when it's not in a pandemic.
Sure. Sheila, what Bounce Back does is we train people in prison, in a number of different prisons, mainly in London, but also in Leeds and around the country. And we train them in construction skills predominantly, but also everything they need in order to get a job when they leave prison. And then we support them through their leaving. And then we have our own social enterprise. So we do lots of painting and decorating in the community, and they can join that when they leave, or they join some of the employers that we work with who are all large construction companies. So they're people in a whole variety of different levels of construction and at different stages. So as you can imagine, we do absolutely nothing to do with astronomy, and this has been a really exciting project. So, and Mari will tell you a little more about that as the program unfolds.
Yeah, it is going to be really interesting to find out how we've evolved from construction and painting to astronomy. So what was the original RAS200 Bounce Back project, and how has it evolved over the years that we've been working together?
Well, we were really excited by the opportunity of thinking about how we can engage with prisoners and introduce them to astronomy. And we started out thinking in two ways. First of all, we thought we could make some kind of physical impact on the prisoner's environment. And the way we did that was to do a visitor centre in Brixton and make some beautiful murals. And Fran will talk more about that later. And the other side of things was to pair up with different RAS fellows. We started out by trying things out. So we initially went into Brixton Prison again, and with I think 3 or 4 different fellows over the first year, and delivered engagement exercises. So for example, we might have explored the training of astronauts. And I believe Sheila, in fact, you delivered one of the exercises. So it might be fun to hear your side of things. But going back to how the program developed, so we started off in that way, and then we thought this is working really well. We're getting a great level of engagement, lots of people wanting to come. So in the following year and a half, we tried to develop modules, different topics that could bolt together and produce programs, mini programs, and that was really interesting. And we worked with three fellows on 3 different pilots, and we wanted to engage with as wide an audience as possible. So we went into a young offenders institution, Feltham, and we went to a women's prison, Bronzefield, and we did a final session in Brixton Prison in autumn last year. And during that period, we developed things like our solar system, humans in space, stars and galaxies. And I think what we learned from is in each case, we always took questions from participants in advance of a session and developed elements of the session around what people actually wanted to learn about. And the feedback that we got from participants was that that was something they very much enjoyed, having their own thoughts explored and addressed rather than just being talked at. So I think that takes us up to today. So then, of course, we had the great big COVID asteroid hit the Earth, and we had to think again about how to do the project. And I think we're going to talk about that a bit later.
Yes, Yes, we are. So was there anything you wanted to add to that, Fran, about the project and how it's evolved? Or
I think it's been the fantastic response we've had, not just from prisoners, but from the prison officers and the people who encounter the sessions along the way, that have made us realise and or have helped feed into our ability to develop it. And that's really led, I think, both Maury and I to, well, mainly Maury, to see the value of it. And like so many of the projects that we've met through or the other individual organizations that we've met through this project, I think it's been the infectious enthusiasm that's really driven it. And that's been really heartening, and that probably has helped us to develop. But in terms of the action, and yes, we have inevitably adapted it along the way, because we didn't know, regimes change in prisons, different prisons want it, other people, don't have the capacity. So there's been a lot of there have been changes along the way, but all of them predominantly positive. So more people asking for it, which has been exciting. So in a sense, where we started with one commitment, it's now grown to be more.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. And so you sort of hinted there about working with prisons. What are the specific challenges with working with prisons?
I think you can probably imagine most of them. But effectively, you're very dependent on the regime of the prison itself, and the capacity for them to get you in and out at the most fundamental level. It's a lot of complications. So we might book in 5 sessions, of which only 2 might be feasible, or 1 might be feasible because something can change at the last minute. There might be a lockdown, there might be something. So regime is always a big challenge. In terms of getting around a prison and getting people into a prison, that often has its own attendant challenges. Will people be authorized to come in and out? Will they pass their security checking? And can we, and then also, more to the point, and more importantly for us, is can everybody get out of their cells into the session? So I think, Sheila, you'll have experienced a lot of this when you've come in, but and so will some of the others who've come and joined us there for some of our events. But I mean, I think the real challenge is, for example, at the last event we had, it took us an hour to get in, so everyone was standing outside, trying to get in. So there's a lot of individual challenges. The most important one is whether or not the prisoners can actually get to the wherever it is where we're holding the session. So often they might have a medical appointment, they might have family visits, something can happen and it all blows out the water. So the challenges are around that. It's not so much around instilling enthusiasm in the governors and the officers. They love it. And we're very lucky in that in Brixton Prison, we have the person in charge of prison radio is actually a passionate astronomer. So she is been a fantastic advocate for us because she's helped us. So those things are the positives, but some of the challenges are really very fundamentally around the actual the kind of actual basic getting in and out, running the sessions. That I think is probably the largest challenge. I think Maury would agree.
I would agree, and I think the other thing that we discovered as we went along was that it's very difficult to engage with prisoners' families through the prisons themselves if you're not an organisation that deals with that as your day-to-day mission. So that anything that's one step removed from what you're actually, I suppose, licensed to do within that prison, if you try to be at all lateral about what you're trying to do, practically speaking, there are huge barriers to that. So what might seem logical to us, let's introduce this wonderful subject to the prisoners and their families. It just, we've managed, but it's more like a sort of trickle-down effect than being able to engage with people directly.
Yeah.
I think the value is also that we are a training organisation and we are a training and education organisation. So, of course, anything to do with enhancing the education and training of the guys, forget not so much the training, because obviously they're going up and down scaffolding poles, so that's a different thing. But in terms of education, we have that access. So where we might not have access in drug rehabilitation, that's a different thing. We can't even share data. That's something completely different. So there are sort of different levels at which we, and so our area in prisons is quite large in terms of reach, because we are doing training and education. So we're training, you know, a lot of people a day in prison when we are training them.
Yeah, I know when I went into HMP Brixton, it was really kind of not petty challenges, but petty in terms of like when I teach, I get so dependent on laptops and PowerPoint projectors and you know all the bits of kit and stuff, and then I'd done a list of things I wanted to bring in to do the session, and basically I was allowed about 2 of those things, and you know those kinds of things. And when I was in, we did have a lock-in, and I think I was about 3 hours late for my following meeting, but actually I didn't mind. So it was really interesting. Oh, and actually one of the things that I sort of really sticks in my mind from when I came in, which was a few years ago now, was when the guys started filtering in, and one of the guys, I think it must have been one of his first sessions, and he said, what's the point in learning astronomy? You know, we're in cells and, you know, it's not going to help me when I get out. And that kind of made me feel quite nervous, but he actually really enjoyed the session, and hopefully he's gone on to do more things astronomy related. So it's been really interesting. So how do you support the inmates when they leave prison? What's the sort of mechanism for that?
Well, as soon as the good thing is that we can engage with them on a daily basis because we're training them. So it means that whereas the trainers have, we also have a team of support workers, and they go in and engage with the people while they're in there, and so they can pick up on all those bits and pieces like their photo ID, their you know, helping them with their CVs, helping them with all the stuff they're going to need for getting a job. So we do that before they leave, and then when they leave, we stick with them and keep working with them. So that's the kind of the link, and that's a really important thing. So when they've gone, they've got a caseworker or a support worker who spends time with them, makes sure that they're that everything is up to date, that makes sure they've got all the qualifications and the evidence of qualifications, and all the, you know, things like a photo ID, for example, which I mentioned earlier. But you can't do anything without it when you come out, and that's been one of the challenges for COVID, because they haven't been able to have any ID. So you can't get your benefits, you can't claim anything. So in essence, the support is invaluable and essential. And then we work not only with the guys, we work with them and the employers when they come out. So we make sure that we're supporting them, because sometimes if they've never worked in their lives before, this is a real you know, a real challenge, and it's a real it's a whole new experience. So we spend time with them, and we spend time with the employers, so that employers understand exactly how to work with people, and what the support they can give is, and what the best way to work with them is when they come out. So that's an ongoing thing, and we will work with them for up to a year, or as long as it takes. Some take no time at all, some take longer.
To that, I think because I think if you weren't familiar with the sort of structure that Bounce Back has, I think it's useful to add that the reason that Bounce Back is so able to support people along whilst we're working with them and when they've left prison is because we have a team of caseworkers. So you've got trainers, you've got people like me and Fran that help manage things, and then you've got caseworkers who will take a personal interest in somebody's development, and that includes helping them get their cards and helping them on release. Most organisations that are training ones, or you know, like university, you wouldn't have a dedicated team of caseworkers.
Yeah.
So I think it's useful for the audience to hear that's a big part of the process.
Yeah, that sounds like really important stuff, isn't it? That's long-term support afterwards, I can imagine is really valuable to the people who need it.
And also, it's not because they're going to do anything terrible, or they're going to do it. It's just literally that, you know, I think people forget sometimes. It's a bit like when someone takes a job, for example, it's the first job they've had in their lives.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic opportunity, but they might not like it. They've never had a job before, you know. Guess what? They don't want to be a hog carrier, you know. So, you know, and then of course employers get incredibly upset because they sort of go, well, that's not good enough. I wanted this person for life. You know, well, you don't get them for life because they didn't like it very much. Thank you very much. They want to go and become a site supervisor, or they want to go and do, you know, cooking in the canteen. And so people have a choice, but this is what we are really doing, is giving people a choice for the first time in their lives, and they're supported through that. So, you know, they've got someone who they can turn to and go, actually, I'm not enjoying this job very much. And that's one of our teams. So that's why it's really important. And, you know, if they don't turn up for work one day, they're embarrassed. So we step in and make sure that the employers don't go off the boil because someone didn't turn up for work, you know, because it's really important for the next person that comes out of prison that employers don't think it's not a good idea to employ people.
Yeah, I can see that. It's it sounds really powerful. We've sort of touched on the pandemic and how it's changed, well, everyone's lives, but how did COVID particularly affect Bounce Back and the RAS200 project?
As you can imagine, the whole prison regime had to go into immediate and dramatic lockdown. So if anything that we've experienced in the outside world is as nothing compared to the degree to which things have stopped happening in prisons. So the long and short of it is that most prisoners are in their cells for 23 hours a day, and that is because there aren't any activities, there's no education, really for the practical reason that they can't, you know, they can't let people come and go, either in and out of the prisons or within the prisons. So that was the situation that we were faced with, as were all the other organisations that work with prisons. So we tried to think very hard about how we might be able to do something to reach people. And so we came up with a way of getting through to people in their cells. And there's a wonderful person who runs prison radio in Brixton, who had been involved in some of our pilots last year, because one of the events we did was a community event outside the prison walls, which we might come back to later. So we devised a series of broadcasts to go out within every single cell within the prison, so that's to 800 people. And during the broadcasts on the TV screens within each cell, we could put images up. So every Wednesday for 3 weeks, there was a broadcast, and during the broadcast, we mentioned that there's a quiz that they could pick up the following day during their hour out of their cells. And we made some really funky handouts for each topic, which also had sections in called Imagine, where you could think about if you were up in the space station, you were writing a letter to your family, what might you tell them about? So it was a mixture of things. It was a mixture of sort of pure science and some thought-provoking exercises and a fun quiz. And we've had a very good response to the pilot in Brixton. And the amazing thing we found out last week is that it also went out to all the prisons around the UK. So that's rather more than we thought were listening to it last week. So it reached up to 80,000 people in 109 prisons.
That's an incredible reach, isn't it? And probably not what you expected at the beginning of lockdown. So.
Well, no, I mean, we did start right from the beginning. We were badgering National Prison Radio, saying, can we do something? Mainly because of thinking of these poor people sitting in their cells and knowing that something as thought-provoking and inspiring as astronomy might be just what you need to take your mind off things and be stimulating. So we were hoping it might happen. But in the way that we mentioned earlier, that with prisons, the communication is often one way. So you'll ask or suggest lots of things, and then at the last minute you'll find out if it's yes or no. It's something you learn live with as part of the whole thing of working with prisons. So it wasn't a surprise not to have heard, but it was a lovely surprise to find out that it had happened. Or in the middle, we found out in the middle of it happening. So Sunday was the last broadcast, so the last for the time being, because we may be able to do it again, hopefully.
Yeah, fantastic. What I really like is the fact that the inmates were doing quizzes, and I think the whole country have been doing extra quizzes during lockdown. I mean, I've certainly done some with my family, so that's cool. So how has the project inspired or affected the people that work for Bounce Back, Fran?
I think that's a really good point. Most of it, there was a general, as you can imagine, as we said at the beginning, you know, working in construction and suddenly going on this complete departure, which was all around astronomy, was kind of quite a surprise for everybody. And what's been really interesting is that watching, because obviously Mari's been using the team to go into the prison with the at the events when we do a session in there. And, you know, they all go in very skeptical, going, oh yeah, right, this is a right old load of nonsense. And then as soon as they've been in and actually experienced it, they then realize, and one of the things probably we haven't mentioned is that a lot of the people who actually come on the sessions actually know an enormous amount and question the fellows, give the fellows quite a challenge, because apart from the fact we know they're all obsessed with black holes and conspiracy theories, which of course is their absolute, you know, their music to their ears. Even so, there have been some extraordinary ones. I mean, there was one I remember when I was in Brixton, where one of the guys turned around and said, oh, this is very, you know, this is very minor stuff for me. I mean, I'm way beyond all this on this. I mean, I know a lot more about it than we're talking about now. And this is quite, you know, basic from my level of understanding, you know, so a lot of them actually do study it quite a lot and read quite a lot about it. And when I've gone in, you know, because obviously we can't keep the sessions up all the time. And when I've gone in afterwards and they're maybe doing their construction training, or there's a couple of the orderlies who work on the wings more often, they're just all saying, when are you going to do the next session? When are we having another one? And there is that engagement from people who actually know their onions. It's not just people that don't know about it, which is what's been really interesting. But when it comes back to the staff, and the staff have seen that, and of course that's inspired them, and then they've got quite involved in it. So in terms of, you know, we now do, you know, when we do our emails, and in fact I was going to suggest we do Teams meetings on a regular basis, and it would be good, you know, we always suggest that we do an update on the project, so that the team can, you know, one of the advantages of COVID, the team can actually see each other and talk about it. And the trainers have found it, you know, really interesting when they've been in there and they've seen the guys engaging with it. So there's all the sort of the attendant, you know, rumble in the jungle, and all the atmosphere around it is incredibly positive and engaging, and it sort of just sucks people in, doesn't it? As obviously you know, and it sucks people in and gets people thinking, which is what's been so exciting about it. But more to the point, it's got people very positive, and they start to see why. And in fact, you know, yeah, that's been a really interesting part of the whole project.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry, I think, Fran, you mentioned the prison staff as well, but I remember one really sort of an old guard person, you know, uniformed officer, and I always really enjoy it, as I think we all do, when people are really honest about what they're expecting, and he said, well, I think this is a load of nonsense. And then at the end he came up and he said, well, I had no idea it was going to be that interesting. And honestly, he was glowing. It was brilliant. And you know, he'll tell the others in the team room, now I thought that was all, you know, nothing to do with real life, but you know, he was very impressed by the way that people all got together and did the, you know, did the group exercises and problem solving exercises. So I think people just were like, yeah, go on then, see how that works. And it worked. So it was proof of concept, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a bit of it as well is using astronomy as a kind of hook, but actually, like you said, it's more to do with teamwork and problem solving and confidence and, you know, other things around that as well. So how has the project affected the inmates, and how did you sort of sell the project or sell astronomy to the inmates in the first place?
Well, it wasn't really a hard sell, because I mean, if you're cynical about it, if we start from a kind of cynical point of view, anything interesting that gets you out of your cell or gets you out of something else that you might find less than fascinating, level 1 maths, or I don't know, people will come along to see what it's going to be like. But because of the subject matter, so that's a cynical point of view, we thought all along that the idea of outer space would appeal to all, really a huge percentage of the prison population, simply because, as we've said before, every human child has, one way or another, been introduced or seen for themselves, you know, the sun and the moon, and been aware that there's something up there and out there. So it's really difficult to find the right language to describe it, because it uses all astronomical terms, you know, it's a universal subject. So in each prison, when we've advertised or passed the word around that the sessions were going to come, we've had very good initial attendance. But what we've also had is we've had increased, so on a 3-session program, we've had an increase in people coming to the 2nd and 3rd session, which is not unheard of, but it's pretty unusual. And that's because people enjoy it so much, they tell their friends, or they tell the people that they're, you know, with in prison, and more people come. So we were thrilled about that.
So it's the power of word of mouth as well. And it just goes to show that if people enjoy something, they'll tell their friends, won't they?
Yes.
So,
and I think from the point of view of what people say, you know, if you ask people questions to get evaluation information, that's one thing. But if you have the physical proof of more people turning up because they've heard about it, then that's as good a validation as you could possibly hope for.
Definitely, yeah. So in terms of the outcomes, there's been sort of the obvious outcomes, but have there been any surprising outcomes that you found from introducing astronomy to the inmates?
I think from my point of view, we've found that we've been asked to go into more prisons, which is good. So we've been asked to talk to one up in Barnard Castle even. So we're now we're now looking at the whole of North Yorkshire and various others, but a lot of the prisons actually have heard about the course. So that's, you know, all the stuff that we're doing. We've had prisoners who have applied to come on our training courses because of it, which has been quite interesting, because they've wanted to find out, they've heard about us through the astronomy, and they've asked to come on our construction training courses because they think we sound like good people if we're doing this. And similarly afterwards, if they come out, and so it's actually impacted on the people who come out and approach us afterwards saying that they know that we've done it. Can we do any more on that? So there's been a kind of, it's fairly general in terms of, and also I've had conversations with prison governors, which takes a while to warm them up to the concept, but once they've got the drift, you know, they are pleasantly engaged, and I think that's been valuable, actually, that the governors, going back again to the officers, but the governors as well, get that this is something different. And although I know that we're not introducing COVID at this point because it's a separate subject, but I mean, as far as COVID is concerned, it's very obvious that everyone is looking for things that are different, and that's been a very positive thing. So this has opened the gates to more of this kind of thinking, and that's where I think, well, I know going forward it's something we're talking about much more, and it's become, I suppose you could say, if you like, that one of the interesting outcomes of this is that we see it as being something we want to make part of our ongoing work now.
One thing to add to that, which we forget because we're so used to it, we bounce back, I mean, it is some feedback that we had last week in relation to the recent broadcast and handout program, which was, a couple of people said, we invited some fresh feedback from all the people who've been involved, and we had several comments about how it had given people a different perspective, given them a sense of, well, I mean, when you call it mindfulness, it always sounds a bit like sitting around chanting. So, but one of the hopes right at the beginning was that it would help people feel big of a part of a bigger thing in a way that's reassuring, rather than feeling like you're alone, stuck in your tiny cell. And we've had quite a lot of, now over the years, now we get told that really quite often, that people find it a very heartening thing to see the bigger picture. And there's been a lot of philosophical talk. People end up talking about God and things like that, which surprised. Again, we had a fresh bunch of comments saying it's really interesting. Everyone's talking about God and the universe and things, and you think, well, good.
Yeah.
That's that's better than thinking about what is tea going to be early or late, which is the biggest topic of conversation on a day-to-day basis in most cells.
Yeah, astronomy does do that, doesn't it? Makes you think wider.
It's also invaluable that it's on television so much now. There's so much on television. Of course, that's one thing they see. So of course that continues, if you like, a lot of the work that we do. So it's that's been incredibly useful.
Brilliant. We'll try and get more space stuff on TV. And what about, so we talked about the inmates, we've talked about the staff. What about the impact that the project might have had on the families, the prisoner families?
I think that we've always been very passionate about making sure that we can spread the word further than just the prisoners. So the first thing is the impact on the families comes from the prisoners themselves. And the first evidence we had of this is that when we did an event, there was a street fair for the anniversary of Brixton Prison outside the prison. And a lot of the families came up to us and started talking to us about, because we had a space there and we had a wonderful gyroscope, which was great, and the children could go on it and stuff. And a lot of the families came up to us and said they'd heard about it from their husbands, who were in the prison. And what one of Murray's points earlier was around the challenge of it's really about getting the time of the prisoners, because obviously if the organizations working with families are allocated time, they have to use that time with their processes and their programs. So sometimes it's quite hard to interrupt that time. So for us, if we can capture the families, that's essential. So where we try and do it is in the visitor centre, so that the work that we did completely repainting the visitor centre, which Sheila, you've seen, and some of the other fellows were involved in, particularly in working out where the different planets had to go and making sure we got them in the right size. But all of those fundamentals, were very much about spreading the word, but it has to be done in a way that prisons can manage. So we've been asked, we've now, as well as the programme being becoming part of what we're doing, we're talking to a lot of prisoners about improving their prison environment, and one of the things that we're looking at is putting this astronomy into various visitor centres. So we've been talking about how we can do that. So those are because we've seen the impact, the more information that we can give people around, where they're sitting in with their families, the better. And equally, we wanted to do more. We want to continue to try and do more. So we are exploring different ways of doing that. And again, we've had this interruption to all our lives, and actually that gives us ways of doing things differently. So we're looking at more of it, but effectively now it was really good to hear the families coming and engaging with us and talking to us about what an impact it had had.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a really important part of it, isn't it? Because we forget that the inmates are part of families and they have children and wives and husbands and things. So
yeah.
So we've talked about fellows a little bit, and I think one of the really big success stories of this project is how much you've managed to involve fellows. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you've done this, and also give examples for future fellows, how they might get involved in the years to come?
Well, it's part of the progression that we spoke about almost at the beginning, that we initially started doing one-off sessions in which a fellow would come and maybe talk about what they often deliver as a community engagement or a teaching topic. And then we started building those with fellows into modules that perhaps somebody else might be able to deliver another time. They're still in progress, but they're in, they're shaping up. And then we worked with fellows again, well, one fellow in particular, to develop a series of publications that went along with the broadcasts. So we're hoping that those two elements could be the things that we do more of next year. And as Bounce Back is reaching out into more prisons around the UK, there should be opportunities for people. And most of the actual piloting has been done in the southeast. So there's now an opportunity to take these modules or create them, depending on what a fellow might want to do. But for example, let's say Leeds prison, there's somebody we've already spoken to who, should we re-engage with Leeds prison, they could go in and run a club or deliver some sessions. So there will be, over time, prisons around the UK where we could then communicate through the RAS saying maybe an opportunity to run a club here, or there are options, but we now have some kit, a kit of parts that somebody willing and able could use to go and deliver some stuff in the prison in Northumberland or Scotland or wherever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be great, because I know since I moved away from London, I've been keen to engage with prisons in the Northwest with you guys as well. So a sort of world domination of fellows and Bounce Back would be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think the more collateral that we can get together, and just get that whole program together would be fantastic.
Agreed, yeah. And I guess this links in, but what's next for Bounce Back for this project as well? And what COVID notwithstanding sort of thing, what do you think's next for the project?
Well, for us, it's absolutely about making it part of our program. So I think that what we're really anxious not to happen, and funny enough, Mario and I were talking about it this morning, is for it not to be thought of as a kind of, it was an exciting project for a bit and then it will just go away, because actually that would be a terrible waste, because the longer we've gone on with it, as I'm sure all the winners had the same experience, we've all got better at it, so we're all now really, it's become a part of our whatever we're all doing. And so for us, it's absolutely, I think it's very much, we've seen the effect and the impact, and we know. And I think when Mari said, we talk about, wellness and mindfulness, but that's such a major part of prison activity now, and particularly, post-COVID, it will be even greater if you imagine being locked up 23 hours a day. So it's just such a big part of the way people are thinking, and is very much, the public health area, or the area of health and well-being is so huge now in prisons to try and improve that I think what's quite exciting is that that gives us an opportunity to, because sometimes you have to look in this wonderful world of where we can, where it fits, and it fits very well into that. So, and it then continues on as well from the education and training that we do. So there's a kind of, there is a good justification for it to become part of what we do going forward. So in terms of us, I think for us, in terms of the RAS, it's about more continuing what we've started in more prisons around the country, and broadening the breadth.
Yeah, definitely. I know from the RS point of view, we'd love to continue this project as much as we can, and we've got over 4,000 fellows, and let's try and get them all involved in one way or another internationally as well.
No, we'd love that.
Yeah, that would be great. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both today. It's one of my favourite projects. Well, they're all brilliant, but I think because I've actually delivered in the prisons and met the inmates and stuff, I feel quite, it's always going to be quite an intriguing project for people to be involved in. So it's been really nice talking to you both today. And now what we're going to do is cut to the video. So hopefully you enjoy the RAS200 premiere of the Bounce Back Foundation video. Thanks again.
Thanks, Sheila.
What first struck me when we started thinking about developing the course was the fact that every boy and every girl, no matter what background you come from, has looked out the window at the moon and wondered about the universe. I'm Mari Duthie and I'm the project lead at Bounce Back for the Royal Astronomical Society project. When people find out about all these different projects the RAS have been doing and how it's engaged with people from as diverse a background as you could possibly get, and perhaps we're a microcosm of that, being a prison or working in prisons, that the fellows who've come and delivered presentations with us, which are now about 15 people, they have found their own expectations confounded about what people may or may not relate to. Well, it's called Explore, and we've created a programme where we use astronomy as a central subject to draw people in. And we've built around it various engagement activities and links with jobs and construction industry to make it relevant to the men and women in prison who are looking to get jobs on release. Astronomy has turned out to be a fantastic gateway through to prisoners' imaginations. It also, something that surprised all of us, even people who've worked with prisoners for many, many years, is partly because there aren't really any wrong questions. You find that people gradually open up and ask more and more imaginative questions about the subject matter as their own imaginations are taking in both the enormity of the universe and the more human side of things.
Everybody is familiar with the solar system. We all know roughly what it looks like. Here we've got obviously the sun on the far left, and then all the planets, including their moons, to scale as we move out to the right. The distances between each of these planets isn't necessarily to scale, but the size of each planet is. So the bigger the planet, the heavier the greater the gravitational pull of that planet.
Through this project, our caseworkers, for example, we had 5 in a session this week, are seeing the prisoners responding to these rather abstract science concepts and then jumping at the chance to think about jobs in industry that are not just hod-carrying jobs. So Bounce Back has learnt to play to its strengths with the help of the RAS in ways that we wouldn't have imagined would happen.